Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here for all things leadership Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And we are happy that you have joined us today. So, we are going to be talking about the L in the simple leadership method, and L is for leverage. It is a concept of what it is you need to do as a leader to maximize what your team can accomplish, to help you move towards your goals, because you cannot do, despite however superhero-ish you think you are. Is that a word?
It is now.
Super superhero-ish you think you are, you cannot do everything by yourself. And your ability to leverage your strengths, right? Your knowledge is important, but so is your ability to leverage the strengths of your team, and other resources and assets that are available to you through your organization. So, Robert, any opening thoughts on this topic of leverage?
Yeah, I do. I do have an opening thought or two. And this one just came to me, and we've been talking about this for a long time. And sometimes when you're so close to the issue or the thing you're talking about, you don't really think about it in very plain terms. But if you think about what a lever is, it's a tool that allows you to lift things, heavy things, easier, and that's how we want to use it. So it is about utilizing your capacity and the capacity of your team to make things easier for yourself, to create a culture of creativity and innovation. And that's what really, using this concept is really all about.
I like it. I like it. So let's just lay out. Robert started there, but let's just lay out a definition. He provided a simple example, and analogy to help you understand this concept. But what we're talking about is the ability to use something to gain an advantage or to achieve a specific outcome, right? And
Mhm.
in business, this often refers to resources or assets that you'll use to generate a greater return or an impact.
Yep.
And essentially, leveraging involves using specific resources. And we're talking primarily in your role as a leader, the resources that are available, your human resources, right? Your human assets, your human capital, your team. And in order to do that, you have to know what their strengths are,
Mhm.
right? And this is something that we talk about as part of Simple all the time. Part of this program is understanding who is on your team, what strengths they bring to the team, and how you can ultimately leverage those. So, without having that knowledge, without a knowledge of self, this goes to emotional intelligence, right? Without having some self awareness and acknowledgement and knowledge of self and those of your team, it's difficult to do that. And what it will take is communication, it'll take trust, right? You don't want your team members to think you are taking advantage of them. You are leveraging what they're bringing to the table, but you're not taking advantage of them, and you're not taking credit for what they do.
Right. And it's really interesting because one of the things that we talked about when we were putting this together is how everybody brings something different to the table because of their culture, their education, their life experiences, their work experience, their generational things. It could be their age, a lot of stuff. And what tends to happen in a lot of organizations is or let's use a department as an example, just still, a team or organization. People come into that department, and the manager tries to blend away all the individuality of everybody else and make one homogeneous unit. And then they wonder why, when there's a problem, it can't be solved, because everyone's thinking they're pulling from the same, drinking from the same well. And so if you can, it requires kind of like a fine, you have to, kind of walk a fine line between keeping that uniformity and allowing people to express themselves in unique ways, and express themselves based on their talents and the skills that they bring to your team.
Yeah, as you were talking, it made me think of diversity, and not diversity in terms of, gender or, racial components and things like that, but all of the things that we bring that are different about us, that is unique about us, that helps us while we have are moving towards the same goal, right? Tapping into the vision and the mission of the organization that we work for, and having that commonality so that we're moving in the same direction. It is the sum of the parts that makes it all work, right? And it allows you to leverage, right, the abilities, the talents, the skills, the knowledge, those experiences that people have that are going to help you to be more creative, more innovative, and to ultimately increase productivity, which is what you're striving for, right? And that starts to explain why this is important. It's important because you can't do it yourself. It's important because if everyone brought exactly the same thing, the same knowledge, the same experiences, because they all come from, one school of thought, you don't have the opportunity to see what other possibilities there are, right? What other approaches there may be, what other pathways may get you where you're trying to go, maybe more expeditiously, more efficiently, more effectively, or that explores the needs from a different perspective. And sometimes when I think we talked about this back a while, I won't bring up a particular commercial or anything, but you think about ad marketing or advertising campaigns, right? And they go horribly sideways, and you're thinking, was there no one on this team?
The phrase that I use is, who was in the room? Who was in the room? And that happens so many times because you have people thinking the same way. And because they're thinking the same way, not only does it stop them from seeing problems, solutions, it stops them from seeing problems as well.
Yeah.
So it not only does it prevent them from creating solutions, creative solutions, it stops them from seeing problems. And and I don't want to go too far down the advertising rabbit hole, because I think I know the commercial, one of the commercials you're talking about, because we brought it up in one of the shows before. But they were so happy that I'm guessing, I wasn't in the room, they wouldn't have had the problem they had if I were in the room. I was in the room. They were so happy that they came up with something that was different.
Yeah.
They didn't stop to say, now is this a problem? Because it was the homogenized thinking probably that got them to say, oh, this is a great idea. But no one said, hey, what's the problem with this? And so you're leveraging that person's perspective as well.
Yes.
And that's one thing that I was working with a client earlier this week, and they were putting a presentation together, and we talked about that, and I said, and I don't usually give advice, but he said, he asked, what advice would you give me? I said, well, as a coach, I don't like to give advice, but I'll throw a suggestion out there. You can take it or leave it. Do a run through, a dry run, but have someone there whose job is to poke holes
Yeah.
in what you say, so that you can, look at those things if they're legitimate and come up and craft your responses to those things. And it also reminds me of a story that I heard years ago. And I don't know if I ever shared it with you, but it was a story that someone told me about perspective. And it was these two older gentlemen, older in their 40s, young gentlemen to me.
And he was older, but you must have been 12.
Yeah, young gentlemen working on their cars. And when they're working on their cars, they somehow, one of the guys backed the car up into the other, and the bumpers got locked and they couldn't unhook them. And so you have these two pretty smart people trying to figure out how to do this. And one of the I call him mechanic's son came up and said, Dad, I think I have a solution. Because it was a child, they didn't listen to him. So this went on for about 2 hours. They were stuck, and the kid walked up and just went to say something to his father. His father went to him and said, Dad, just let the air out of the tires in the car behind them, and then drive the other car away. And that was the solution, because it was a different perspective.
Yes.
And it nothing to do with the kid's education. He was in elementary school. Maybe it did have something to do with it. The kid's age, maybe it was an advantage. So, they could look at things, people can look at things different based on their lived experience. And sometimes leaders forget that.
Absolutely. It reminds me, this is not a story that I know about firsthand. One of those stories similar to the story you just told that gets shared. And the solution was the same thing, letting the air out of the tires. I think there was a truck or something that was bigger than the tunnel, and tried to go through got wedged in, right? And the solution was the same thing. And everybody's trying to figure out, it's like, no, you're not going to disassemble the tunnel, right? You're not, it's like the very simple thing is, and you're not going to drive it forward and you're not going to drive it back because it's wedged in. So the simple thing was to let the air out of the tires, which reminds me of one other thing in the movie. Have you seen the movie, The Italian Job?
I have not.
I love that movie. It's about some robbers, some thieves, right? And they pull a job in Italy, and then it goes awry. They pull a job similar in Los Angeles or somewhere, and one of the guys that was part of this crew in Italy, who's the reason that the heist went awry ultimately, ends up with what they stole, right? So he ends up with what they stole. They decide they want to get it back, and they go about doing it. He's smart, anticipating what they're going to do. They're anticipating what he's going to do. They do this whole three-card Monty thing where there are 3 trucks, and they're trying to figure out which one the gold is in. It's gold that was stolen. They're trying to figure out which one has the gold. And one of the guys says, let's just look at how the truck with the gold would be lower
suspension,
right, because it's weighed down than the others. And it's like, oh, and that's right. It's just a simple thing. Once you hear the solution, you go, oh yeah, well, that was obvious, right? But before it's obvious, it's not. And being willing to hear people with different perspectives makes all the difference. And so that's one of the things that I can say I have, being willing to acknowledge I'm not always the smartest person in the room, not always the smartest person in the room, has led me to be willing get support and help from other people, right? To build my teams with people who have knowledge and expertise in areas that I don't, and to be okay with that. And I think it's one of those areas where people who are leaders, they want to be the smartest in the room. And therefore, it makes it difficult to bring other people to be part of what you're doing so that you can benefit from the expertise, the knowledge, the experiences that other people have that you don't have, because you don't want people to know that you don't know everything.
Yeah. And sometimes I agree with what you're saying, and I want to add to that. Sometimes it's not so much about expertise, although that does have a lot to do with it. Sometimes it's just about title, right? They don't want to listen to somebody who isn't on their level. I've worked in organizations where if you walked by an executive and said hello to them, they just wouldn't acknowledge you. They would just pretend you didn't say anything. And that was how they operated, because you didn't have value other than your job. If it had to do with your job and your task, and your role, then they might address you. But generally, they wouldn't talk to you. I always thought that was not the most effective way of leading and inspiring people. I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice. And I remember, and I did mention this on the show. There was this one, obviously when people, they meet me, they typically get a different impression of me than I actually am. and well, I'm not talking about you, but they do. And one of the impressions that people get from is like I'm a pushover, and I'm really not. And I remember once this person, this bigwig in the organization, I said hello to this person. For a couple of weeks, I was hello sir, I wasn't getting that he was not acknowledging me. I was like, well, maybe he didn't hear me. And finally, one day, he got tired of me saying hello and actually went to somebody else and said hello to him and looked at me in the face and then turned away. I said, oh, he purposely doesn't want to talk to me. So, and I think I did mention this on the show once before. So finally, I just stopped acknowledging him. Like I would see him, I would ignore him. I was like, he doesn't want me to talk to him. And finally, one day, he said hello to me, and I turned and I dramatically looked behind me. I was like, oh, hello, sir. It was like, and he was, embarrassed because I don't know what, I guess he was in front of somebody and he wanted to, I treat my employees well. And, but, that's not the most effective way to get people on board with you. And if you can't do that, you cannot leverage their skill and talent, because they're not necessarily, and maybe they're, more mature than I was. They're not necessarily going to be like, okay, I'll put my best foot forward regardless of how this person is treating me. That's not the most effective way to engage people, to motivate and inspire people.
Yeah. I'm thinking about some efforts that I was a part of back when I was lobbying. And again, being willing to be someone who says that I don't have particular knowledge, or someone else has more knowledge than I do, more experience, they can bring something else to the table. One of the things that came about because of that is that sometimes I had people who were part of efforts that I was leading that I didn't necessarily like, right? And it wasn't it's not about putting together teams of people that you like. And the types of teams I was leading were not teams of people that I had they were not direct reports of mine, right? So I was often leading teams of volunteers, so to speak. These were not volunteers. They worked for other organizations. I worked for a trade association, and it was my job to build coalitions and to create opportunities for the members that my organization represented, it, I needed to make sure that we were putting forth legislative efforts and legislative language that represented, like 440 different entities, and would get past the members of the legislature and often stakeholders that were not in alignment with where we were coming from, right? And so being able to do that, I learned a lot about leveraging and teams and team building when you don't have any legitimate authority over people, right? And consensus building. And what I learned ultimately was that I didn't need to like them. They didn't need to like me. I needed to be someone who, you were talking about involvement and engagement. I needed to be someone who would listen to people, right? Give them an opportunity to be heard, and then really tap into what they were bringing that was going to be a benefit to the effort that I was leading. And the more I did that, the more successful we were, right? When I saw other people and their efforts keeping sort of that universe very narrow, more in alignment with what they thought or what they wanted, rather than making sure there was broad input, those efforts didn't seem to succeed as much, because in the end, you've got to be able to get buy-in from people. And when people feel like they've been heard and that a lot of perspectives have been considered, discussed, and any reason that you decide to not go in a particular direction, that you communicate that back out, you tend to get the kinds of results that you ultimately want, ones that people will buy into, even if it's not exactly what they want.
Yeah, my somewhat simple take on that kind of thing is, if you want everybody on your team to agree with you, do it yourself. Don't.
Well, be careful, because you might not agree, but you might not agree with.
Say that again.
So
say
I said you have to be. Even a party of one, you might not wholly agree with you either.
But yeah, but my whole thing is, if you only want people to agree with you, why waste the resources to get everybody together so you can control? I mean, that's just an exercise in ego. If you truly want to get ideas and solutions, let them play it out. And then, if you're, I mean, of course, we're talking about, you need to have rules that govern, the team's conduct. You need to have that in place. That's one of the things. Have clear goals. All those things. You need to really make sure that there's some legitimate parameters around that, but let people play. Let them come up with ideas. Let them bounce ideas. Let them play devil's advocate. Let them disagree. Right? And I think that a lot of times leaders get worried about people disagreeing or conflict. Let them have conflict, but put some parameters around that so that it's constructive conflict. Then you can truly be able to say, okay, here's our pool of ideas. Which one of these are going to be the solution to our dilemma, which is going to give us what we want?
Yeah,
I think that's so. Don't just try to get everybody there and just to agree with you. We call that a royal court. That's just having everybody around you paying tribute to you. That doesn't move the ball. It doesn't move the needle. I shouldn't be using. I hate using all those pat terms, but it doesn't really help get you to where you want to be. It may help you feel better. It may help you feel important,
Yeah.
but it's not really helping the organization. It's not feeding your people either. Right? So it's one of those things.
True, true. So let's talk about some reasons that leaders are not leveraging their teams, right? What are some of the obstacles that are getting in the way, whether it's a personal obstacle or something else? And one of them is a lack of trust, right? That you as a leader may feel that you're the only one who can do this thing, right? And you don't trust your team members to be able to do whatever it is to the same standard that you can do it.
Yeah. Lack of trust. I hinted at one earlier, ego.
Ego.
The other is culture.
Yes.
A lot of times, and I've seen, this is what I do with new leaders when they come to me. It's usually because they stepped in a cultural landmine. So you have to look at what's the culture of the organization, what's the culture we're fostering, and are what we are doing or trying to do, is it against that culture? If you work in an organization that, this is a hard one, that does not foster creativity and innovation, it doesn't matter whether or not you're trying to do that, you're going to be stymied, and that may even get you in trouble. So the other aspect of that is, even if the organization espouses that they want to do that, you have to look at their actual behaviors. That's what's really important, because people can say sometimes what they're saying is aspirational, even though they think they're doing it. So you have to be careful. So culture is one of them. Ego, like you said, trust. Those are some of the big ones, I think.
Another one is lack of awareness, right? And this, I think, goes two ways: lack of awareness of the leader having some self-awareness about some of the challenges they have. Maybe it's insecurity, being a micromanager, something like that, where they're not aware that that's how they're operating. The other awareness is not having awareness of the strengths and capabilities of your team members, right? And you may not know how to actually effectively leverage those strengths, and be okay with getting some awareness around those things, and not just having awareness, but then doing something about it. And ultimately, the things that get in the way are barriers that are created by mindsets, and a shift in the mindset about those things, right? A willingness to trust and empower your team members. That means doing what it takes to give them the power that they need, the rope, so to speak, right? The ability to say what they need to say, to make mistakes, to create a culture of learning and a culture of innovation, which allows people the opportunity to speak up and say what they need to say.
Yeah. That is
whether or not, go ahead.
No. I think we have a little bit of a delay. It usually doesn't happen, so that's why I cut you off. Or were you finished with your thought?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I think. No, I can't remember what I was going to say. No, I think that one of the things that you hit the nail right on the head with self-awareness. You need to be aware of that, and also be explicitly clear with your team about what you want to leverage, what type of team you're trying to create, what types of ideas are acceptable, right? I mean, I think all ideas should be acceptable, as long as you put some kind of, like I said, some kind of parameters around that. But unless you have a discussion about that and you're clear about it, you're not going to get there. I find that so many leaders and teams struggle when they're trying to create solutions to problems, or they're trying to be more innovative, because they think that operating in the same way they have will allow them to solve a problem that they've never seen before. Usually doesn't work out that way. Hey, Whit.
Yeah.
Yeah, for some,
Yes.
there's a really odd delay.
Just keep going. Can't do anything about it.
Okay. Okay. No, but it's weird because sometimes you'll be saying something, but your picture won't be moving.
Maybe I can snap my fingers. I'll snap my fingers to make it go away.
No. Sometimes you'll stop speaking right on the camera, but the words will come out. I'm like, what? Should I say something? No, but it's a lot of times you cannot solve a new problem using the same approach that you always use. That's where people get stuck. And unfortunately, they can't see it. And that's why you need a different perspective. And that's why it's good to allow people to express themselves and really create a team with complementary strengths to your own.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to, since we seem to be having some technical difficulties, before we wrap up, I want to just touch on how leaders can use their leadership abilities. This is May, and we are here talking about leverage, but May is also Mental Health Month. And so just want to explore some things that leaders could be doing, leveraging what the resources that you have, your human resources, other resources, assets in your organization that you can use to help create healthy work environments for your employees, right? And they're the same things we've been talking about, but looking at ways that you can leverage them specifically to help your people. We've got lots of things that are creating, factors that are creating angst and anxiety for employees, right? Uncertainty about the economy, lots of layoffs happening, inabilities to fill vacant positions, which have those employees who are still working for you overworked, overwhelmed, right? They're taking on more and more with less and less resources. And so things that you can do that will help your employees with their mental and emotional health become really important. And so the kinds of things that you want to make sure that you are leveraging for your team, for your team members, include this idea, and we talk about this frequently, of fostering, right, communicative environments, right? Having open communication in your workplace, giving your team an opportunity to speak about what they're going through, right? Being able to share what's happening so that we can ultimately reduce the stigma surrounding mental health and create an environment where employees are feeling supported and understood.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think one of the things that would be helpful would be to encourage leaders to embrace not necessarily digging into somebody's mental health challenges, but allow them to express them when it's going on. I think that a lot of these organizations that have EAP, these employees, they just, go talk to that person, right? Their boss, some of these folks may see their boss as a safe haven, somebody that they can confide in. We're not saying that they need to be friends with this person, but at least treat them in a humane way.
Yes.
And I think that sometimes managers, they want to skirt away from anything that seems personal with people. And I understand that dilemma. You certainly don't want to get too personal with people, but you want to be able to keep the doors open for them to ask you questions, talk to you about some of the challenges they're having. You as a leader should be empathetic, engage in really strong active listening, and then if need be, you can go ahead and direct that person to the resources that can help them.
Absolutely. And in that respect, encouraging self-care and work-life balance. And, we are still dealing with situations where people are being called back into the office. Some people are working fully from the office. Some are doing some remote work. Some are doing virtual work, and all sorts of combinations and iterations of that. But regardless of where your employees are working, making sure that they are taking care of themselves, right? That they are not working more than they should. Where flexible work arrangements are possible, that those are made available, that people are encouraged, and you are promoting taking breaks throughout the day, right? People should not be working all day without breaks, without going, without lunch, right? And removing themselves for a period of time so that they can better, ultimately, so they can take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Growth opportunities, right? You can leverage your team's abilities to provide by providing growth opportunities and challenges for them, that they are getting the training, the coaching, the mentoring that they need, right? That they have the information that they need to technically do their job, and opportunities to grow into future opportunities, whether it's projects or other positions. This sends the message that you value what they bring to the table, and it's a motivating factor. And this can help contribute to positive mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's a good thing that you added that.
I think we don't pay enough attention to the fact that when people are, first of all, there's the concept that if we're not growing, we're dying,
Mm-hmm.
right? That life is about continuing to grow and making sure that those opportunities are available makes a huge difference in the workplace. Along with that is recognizing and appreciating your employees for what they bring to the table, right? For their contributions, and recognizing what they do creates a positive and supportive work environment. And that too contributes to positive mental health. And then empowering your team members to support each other, right? You can't do everything, and you shouldn't be called upon to do everything, but empower your team members to support each other, to look out for each other. Going back to Robert's point about, yes, you should know your team members, you should know things about them. You don't have to plan vacations together in order to have a sense of who they are, what's important to them, what their goals are, what's happening in their world, right? The challenges that they're having that's impacting work, right? You don't need to know everything about them, but you certainly need to know enough about what's going on in their world that's impacting their work and how they're showing up each day. And one of the things you can do is create an environment where team members are supporting each other, because that helps lead to trust among them, you trusting them trusting you, creating that collaborative team culture that ultimately also promotes positive mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so all of this ties together, right? None of the things that we talk about here on the program are in a vacuum. All of this ties together. And so your willingness to look at how you are leveraging your team, leveraging the resources that you have available for the benefit of your team, ultimately helps your team to be stronger, right? Because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so you want to make sure everyone is standing in and operating out of their strengths. And you work together to make that happen.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So any final thoughts as we wrap this up today?
I had one thought earlier, and I thought it was funny that you were talking about the team being greater than the sum of its parts. And I was like, it's synergy. And it's one of those words that gets used so much that we've tried to avoid it, because it was once one of those catchphrases that people used to use in business, and it got overused. But I think that is not a bad term to use. It's about getting everybody working so well together that the output is so much greater than what you could do normally. I think that's a really important concept that you brought up earlier.
Awesome. Thank you. So, ultimately leverage is your friend, right? It's a tool. It's a tool that you can use that helps your team's abilities to shine, their strengths to be brought out. And it can be used both for pursuit of your goals, your common goals, the work that you're doing, but it is also, it plays a huge part in the mental well-being and the mental health of your team, making sure that they are a part of what it is you're doing. This is not about you for them to learn, to grow, for them to bring their best selves to work, right? Because what that results in is increased job satisfaction, productivity, employee retention, right? And your ability to create a culture where employees ultimately feel supported, valued, empowered. You do that by using great communication skills, providing access to resources, whatever those resources you have available. Robert mentioned one, employee assistance programs. There are other things that you have available to you. You can make sure that your employees are part of organizations that relate to their jobs, employee affinity programs, networking, associations, and others that give them opportunities, again, to tap into their skill sets, their talents, their abilities, create networks outside of your organization that will then help them within your organization. So hopefully you can see the benefit of leverage. And we would love to hear how you are leveraging your abilities, your strengths, and those of your team, those of your organization to create the culture and the environment that where your employees can thrive. So we would love to hear about that. Send us a message, and we can talk about those in the future on the program. So, Robert, let's share a little bit about how the audience can get in touch with you if they want to leverage you as a resource. How can they get in touch with you to do
They
that?
can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com. When you go there, there is a place where you can fill out a form and send it to me for a discovery session, and we can discuss anything you want to talk about. I do love to work with people that are in those sticky, complex issues. If you have any of those, please come to me. Working with your team, if you're having problems with your team, if you want to put yourself in a better frame of a better light at your job, working on your leadership presence, that's something else that I focus on with my clients. So feel free to go there, visit my website, send me an email, and my website is roberthilliardcoaching.com. Very simple. That's it.
There you go. Make it easy. Make it easy. And if you are contemplating making some moves in your career, whether you're looking for assistance with career management or making a transition, looking to move into leadership, or you're in leadership and you're looking to make a move even further in leadership, or shifting out of, reach out to me. I would love to be of service to you. My website is, let's see if we can get this to pop up. We can get out of here before technology totally fails us. Shiftingintoaction.now.site. Well, what are you going to do? It is what it is, right? We're leveraging technology so that we don't have to all be in the same room at the same time, because Robert and I are on two different coasts of the United States. So we're leveraging technology, and sometimes, it doesn't cooperate. That's nothing more I can say. Shiftingintoaction.now.site. I have some gifts there for you if you would like to avail yourself of them. One is the ebook, Love Your Work, and another is about creating wellness actually in your life. So check those out and look for us next week. We're going to be continuing our discussion about leverage and applying that to things that are happening in the news. So we'll be talking about leadership issues in the news next week. And this month, we are reading the book Leadership by Peter G. Nordhaus. You can look for that discussion as part of our monthly book club selection on the fourth Thursday this month. So until next time, which will be Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, take care.
Bye now.